Today we're making 4 different types of spirits. 2 of them were made by freezer jacking, the other 2 were run through a simple pot still, and everything was made from random stuff out of my pantry. So as long as you've got something in your pantry and a freezer, you're going to be able to make at least one of these spirits. I'm Jesse, and this is still at the channel all about chasing the craft of home distillation and making it a legitimate hobby. Lockdown's got people kind of in a bit of a flutter. They're not able to do the stuff they're normally able to do. They're looking for something to keep themselves entertained and feel like they're doing something constructive. And you know what else they're looking for? A drink. So today we're going to make 2 different mashes, 2 different fermented products that we can then distill in 2 different ways, giving us 4 different total products. Maybe you don't have a pot still at home. That's fine, you can freezer jack this stuff. If you're not into this kind of thing, chances are you're not going to have any malted grain. That's fine, you don't need it because you can make the fruit and sugar wash instead. Think of this a little bit like a choose your own adventure. Pick the options you like, pick the options you want to do or you're able to do, and at the end you're going to get something quite drinkable. And I tell you what guys, this stuff, it's really not bad. It's actually pretty good.
First up, we're going to make a wash that uses malted grain to convert starch, random starch from out of your pantry, into sugar that the yeast can ferment. Now, like I said, if you don't have malted grain and you can't get any, that's no problem. Skip this recipe and go on to the sugar and fruit wash. You're going to have different things in your pantry, obviously, but I'll show you what I have so you get an idea of what you're looking for. If you can, weigh what you're collecting so you know exactly how much you've got. You're looking for 3 kilos in total. The first thing I have is bread. Honestly, any bread is going to work. If you've got something dark and rustic and serious, some sourdough perhaps, that'd be great. I'm using the cheap stuff. Next up, rice. I think you guys are getting the idea. There's no real proportions here. Whatever you've got, whatever you feel like using, whatever proportions you want to use, that's fine. Rice bubbles and cereal's a great target. Leftover bagel crisps, anything where you've got a few crumbs left around, use it up. Quick oats, masa, wholemeal flour, Cocoa Pops, I mean, why not? Wine biscuits, potatoes and kumara. I'm peeling these and cutting them up because we are going to cook them. We want them to cook evenly. Some more random crackery things, and some flaked wheat, and some rolled oats. Next, put 5 litres of cool or warm water in a pot and start warming it up. I'm going to do this in the induction heater because I can, but you could totally do this on the kitchen stove as well. Throw a couple of handfuls of the malted barley into the pot at this point in time while it's still relatively cool. Give it a good stir in. Yes, it is going to denature those enzymes in this small amount of barley, but that's going to stop this whole thing from turning into a sticky goo. We've got plenty more barley for later. This part ain't glamorous. You're going to need to do a whole lot of stirring. You do not want this to scorch on the bottom of the pot. Keep stirring and boiling until everything starts to break down. Take note of what is going to take the longest to cook, and cook that until it starts to fall apart a little bit. Kill the heat and top up with cold water to around about 8 litres. If you want to cool down even quicker, you can use some ice. Let it chill down to 70 degrees Celsius. When you hit 70 degrees, you're ready to add your barley. Do not add all of the barley at once. Sprinkle a little onto the surface, stir it in thoroughly, sprinkle a little more, and do some more stirring so you don't end up with everything sticking together, creating dough balls. Keep going until the rest of the 2 kilos of barley is mixed in thoroughly. Pop the lid on, ensure the heat's turned off, and if you can, insulate the pot. We need to let that sit for an hour and a half. Next, we need a nice clean bucket to act as our fermenter, and we need to separate all the chunky stuff from the wash. You could use a colander, you could use a pillowcase, depending on what your significant other would say about that. I happen to have a purpose-built product for this job. It's called a Brew in a bag, so that's what I'm going to be using. Put a bag inside the bucket, tip your goop into it, rinse the pot out with a litre or so of water, and pop that in there as well. With this basic equipment, there's really no pretty way to go about this, guys. I find the easiest way is to lift it, let it drain a little bit, and then start twisting it to tension the bag. Once you get some tension on the bag, you can start squeezing it, which will help force more liquid out. Just be aware you're putting a lot of tension on the material the bag is made from. You don't want to split it and then have to do it all over again. Bring back that initial pot that we were using and transfer your semi-dry bag of goop back into it. Open the bag up and tip in another 5 litres of water. Give it a good stir and go back to squeezing. All those little chunky bits of grainy goodness are little sponges that are still full of sugar water. We want that sugar, that's why we're washing it out with more straight water. When you're finished mangling this bag, you can add the squeezings back into the main fermenter. Now that this is pretty much ready to ferment, let's get started on the sugar and fruit side of things. Once again, the first job is to raid the pantry. Obviously, you're going to have different things than I've got in my pantry, but you're looking for anything that's really, really sugary. You're also going to need a clean bucket. We're going straight into the bucket with this one and 5 litres of hot water. You'll also need a set of scales and a bowl to measure into. We're looking for 2.5 kilos of sugary goodness and a knife for the fruit later on. Syrups are a great option. You can go pretty hard on those. I found maple and golden syrup. Jams are also wonderful, but maybe take it a little easy just because of the preservatives in there. Icing sugar, brown sugar, white sugar, any form of straight sugar you can get your hands on, that's going to do pretty well. And then we can start moving into things like confectionery. I got my hands on some marshmallows, a lollipop, and even an old candy cane. Next up is the fruit. Don't use good fruit. Don't use horrible fruit. Use fruit that's not quite off yet, but probably isn't going to get eaten. Just be aware that the density of sugar is not nearly the same, obviously, as sugar itself, so take that into account when you're weighing things out. I mean, guys, this is barely a recipe. Don't stress it too much, okay? I went with apples, pears, bananas, and a little passion fruit. It turned out I was a little short on that 2.5 kilos, so I went back to the pantry, raided it again, found some black licorice, and some dried dates. They all went into the bowl. Once you've got your 2.5 kilos, adjusted of course for the amount of fruit you've used, whack it into the hot water, give it a really good stir and get it as dissolved as you can. Rinse that bowl out with hot water to get all the sugary goodness, tip it into the fermenter, and now you can top up with cold water. You're looking for around about 15 litres in total. From here on in, we can treat the 2 different washes, the fruit wash and the full mash, in exactly the same way. If you have a hydrometer and you know how to use it, by all means go ahead and take a reading to get your original specific gravity. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we're just trying to figure out exactly how much sugar is in this liquid. If you don't have one, don't worry about it. Ensure the liquid is between 20 and 25 degrees Celsius. Give it a really vigorous stirring for at least a minute to try and whip some oxygen into the liquid, and then we can pitch the yeast. I'm using baker's yeast. Honestly, I didn't even measure it. I'm guessing it's probably about 4 teaspoons per bucket. If you have lots of floaties on top and it seems to be preventing the yeast to get into the liquid, you can give it a quick stir. If you have an airlock, obviously use it. Otherwise, honestly, you can use Glad wrap and poke a few holes in the top, or use a lid, just don't fit it completely. Leave it slightly loosely fitting. If you have a hydrometer, obviously use that to tell when fermentation's finished. If you don't, here's a few tips. Leave it for at least a week, and then check to see if all signs of fermentation have stopped, so there's no bubbling or churning. If they haven't, wait a little bit longer. If they have, wait for another 2 or 3 days, then you're done. I'm going to freezer jack 2.25 litres of each wash, so that's 1 large Coke bottle for each wash. The trick now is to get the wash cleanly into the bottles without the floaty bits on top or the yeasty muddy stuff at the bottom. If you used a brew in a bag earlier on with the grain to filter things out, it's not going to be too bad, but you might need to get a little creative with the fruit wash to get everything filtered out. I'm going to use a racking cane. This is literally what the thing's made for. Give the bottles a little burp to allow for expansion and pop them in the freezer. Once the bottles are frozen solid, pull them out of the freezer, take the tops off, and you're going to have to set yourself up a little rig. It doesn't need to be fancy, but it does need to hold the bottles inverted so the liquid will drain out. It also needs to hold the top, the mouth of the bottle, up away from the surface of where that liquid is collecting. I decided to refreeze the liquid I collected and do the process again to make it even stronger. Each time you freeze and collect liquid, you're leaving water behind, which has to make this beverage stronger, a higher ABV. The amount of times you do this is up to you. Obviously, the volume is going to get smaller every time though. Once it's at your desired strength, put it into a suitable bottle. Let's get on to distilling this stuff. Now, I could use this honking big still sitting over here, but I see two problems with that. One is I think it's overkill, honestly, for this small little wash. And two, I'm guessing there's a fair few people out there that don't have anything like this at home. We're going to use this little pot still. Use whatever technique you used earlier on to get the liquid out of the fermenter and charge the still with it. That just means put the liquid into the pot still. Put the still head back in place, get it clamped on nice and tight, connect the water up, and fire up the element. To get the still up to temperature, I'm using full power. Ensure that your first cut jar is in a suitable position to collect the first drips. Yeah, I know this is kind of hacked together. Every now and again, run your hand from the top of the still down the column. We're going from top to bottom so you don't burn yourself. When you start to feel about the middle of that column heating up, you know it's time to start turning the element down a little. I know, there's a thermometer at the top of this still, but honestly guys, unless you've got a little bit of experience and you're used to your equipment, I would suggest forgetting it. Don't even look at it. It's just going to cause more troubles than it will help. Once the still starts producing, you need to play a delicate little game of tweaking the power going into the still to alter the speed of the offtake. In other words, how fast it's dripping at the end. Vapor like this coming out the end is no good. You need to turn the power down or increase the water flow to the condenser. This is about the speed of offtake that I would suggest for a still this size. Once you reach around about 100 mils in that first jar, you can switch it out for another jar. Forget the stuff exists, get rid of it, chuck it away. A lot of people will say to do less than this, but honestly, this stuff isn't going to taste great anyway. It's not something you're going to want to keep. You may as well just get rid of it. From here on in, keep collecting in individual jars of about 200 mils each, line them up on the bench, and make sure you keep them in the same order that you collected them in. Feel free to stick your nose up to the jars and have a smell while you're running the still. Put your nose near the end of the still, smell what's coming off the end, pop a finger underneath, catch a drip and put that on your tongue, taste it. Trust me guys, your senses are the best tool that you could have right now. Don't be surprised if you end up running the still for a solid couple of hours. Keep using your senses, and when you notice one of the following things, you can think about stopping. Is it getting completely watery? Is there just no alcohol left? Or is it starting to taste and smell horrible? You're probably looking for wet cement, wet dog, wet cardboard, funk, toe jams, any of those sort of weird, grungy smells and flavors. Once you think it's time to stop, run another jar or two just in case. You might change your mind later on. Once you've stopped the still, line all the jars up in the order that they came off the still. Smell through them, taste through them, decide what you want to keep and what you want to get rid of. Nearer the beginning of the run, you're going to be looking for things like nail polish remover. Is it spiky? Is it jagged? Does it attack your mouth? At the bottom end of the run, you're looking for funky flavors. Does it smell or taste like wet dog or cardboard? Perhaps a little toe jammy or funky. If it does, you don't want to keep it. Tip all of the jars that are making the cut into one vessel. Let them mingle for a while before tasting and enjoying.
So this is kind of crazy. We've ended up with 4 different products. Now I am going to taste these and tell you what I think of them, but to be honest, whatever you've made at home, you're going to use different ingredients, a slightly different process most likely. You know, things are just going to be different. But I'll give you an idea of what can pop out the other end of a process like this. Let's taste the fruit product first. So the Jack stuff, I honestly, I've got no way of really knowing what ABV this is. I can't use an alcometer in it because there's a whole lot of sugar in it. But it smells great. It smells like a fortified wine. It has an acidity to it. A little bit of licorice, a little bit of generic fruit, and a whole lot of passion fruit, which is weird. I put hardly any passion fruit in there. I guess passion fruit kind of tastes a little bit like fruit salad though, right? It tastes a little bit like everything. I can't believe it, but that's actually pretty good. The mouth feels great. There's a balance between sort of the heat and the lightness of the alcohol with the slight residual sugar that we've got going on. The acidity cleans that palate out at the end, and we're actually getting a little bit of tannin from somewhere. I've got no idea where we're getting the tannin from. If you guys can think maybe what's giving this the tannin, maybe some pith from some of the fruit, or I don't know. But leave a comment down below if you think you know where that's coming from. Oh wow, okay, so this smells much more like a rum, actually, funnily enough. Obviously it doesn't have the sweetness, there's no sugar left in it, but you know, you could back sweeten it with honey or maple syrup or whatever you want to sweeten it with, fruit juice perhaps. You could also age this on wood, which honestly I think I'm going to do. It smells like a rum, like a fruity rum, but instead of being banana-y esters, it's got that fruit salad and passion fruit thing going on as well. A wee bit of the licorice, and a really cool mouthfeel. I'll call that a win. Onto the grain spirit. It tastes like beer without the hops. It straight up tastes like rice bubbles and porridge mixed together. That's crazy. I'm not so sure I'm into that. It's nice, it's interesting. I guess if that's your thing, that's cool. Let's try the spirit. This I'm really interested in. That tastes so much like the other white whiskey that I make. I'm telling you now, I'm gonna put wood in this, and in 6 months' time, people are not gonna know that this is where it came from. It's gonna taste like a single malt. A young single malt, obviously at 6 months, but a single malt nonetheless. That is nuts. It definitely does have a heavier cereal component to it rather than grain, if that makes sense. But that is a perfectly serviceable white whiskey. So there you have it. 4 different spirits made out of stuff that you can find around your home for the most part. And I'll tell you what, guys, that's a pretty good result. Now, one final warning. Remember, guys, please don't sit down and get smashed on this stuff. It is a jacked product and it will give you a shitty hangover. I need to say a huge thank you to the Patreons. You guys are getting me through this crazy time right now, and you're the ones letting me, do more stuff like this because I'm able to go full time on this hobby, on this craft, and with the channel. So thank you guys so much. So if you're new here, welcome. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I had a blast. Please, if you're into this sort of stuff, subscribe for more content just like it. And be aware, guys, and be aware that this is a super simplified process we've gone over today. There is so much more to this hobby in terms of really trying to dial in the flavors and the specific things that you want to be getting out of your spirits. This has been a blast. If you end up trying it, make sure you come back and drop a comment. Let me know what it works out like for you. Keep on chasing the craft. I'll see you next time. See ya.